Good morning. We're in Hemshech Tzadik Dalet 5694, page 55. Good morning. We're in Hemshech Tzadik Dalet 5694, page. Okay. So to sum up what we've learned, we're in the middle of the discussion of rotzen, desire, essentially dissecting the evolution and the process. How from, let's start with a human being, and then we'll move as an example to God, to the godly desire, I should say. How we move from being a living human being, a nefesh, and let's, for our argument's sake, for a moment, there are no desires at all, no active and no conscious desires. So we're born a nefesh, the soul, a spirit that has many potentials, has faculties, and it also has the faculty called to want something, to desire something. It's a force in the soul. The best proof of it, we see that when it's activated, it works. Just like, when you see that a person is using intelligence, you have to say there's a koyach haseichel in the nefesh. And then when you use your intelligence, you're activating and actualizing that faculty. Just like there's the koyach hariyah in the nefesh, the power to see. Take away the nefesh, God forbid, then you have a body, you have an appliance, you have a machine, a box, but it's not active. There's no electricity running into it. So we know there's the koyches hanefesh in the nefesh has that capacity, and then it's actualized. So desire is definitely there, and even a newborn child has a desire. It desires to, it's hungry, it's tired. It may not be developed into a full-blown desires of an adult human being, but the power is there. Just put it into context. Throughout our lifetimes, we're going to have many desires. Some of them will remain just a nice wish, and some of them won't even emerge on that level. They'll just be part of our wiring, as we spoke about, like a ratzon hamuchad ba'atzmus, something that just you're wired that way, but you may never activate or reveal or become conscious of that desire. And then there'll be those that will go through the process, that will actually have a hiserus, as he called it. There'll be something that stimulates and inspires. There'll be a shakavitaria, what to desire and how, and then there'll be a determination and resolve. Yes, this is something worthy of wanting. And then it may take another period of time until you actually start pursuing it. So if you want to sum up everything we're learning, we're talking essentially the process from the earliest stages of the human spirit, of whatever is within us, to actually desiring to the point where we actually pursue it and we acquire or attain the desired objective, whether it's building a home or it's something of another nature. Obviously, there are desires that are more superficial and very momentary, but there are others that are very fundamental to our lives, that essentially the desire is necessary to activate a process that will fulfill our lives and be an essential component to the success and to the happiness of our lives, whether it's the home, whether it's a spouse, whether it's building a family, whether it's higher values and so on. So there's this thing called rotzen. Now, obviously, we're talking here from the human, we can then extrapolate as a mashal and say, we're created this way because God wants us to relate to how he put things into motion. And he too, kavyochel, so to speak, also created a process from a state of atzmus, we're called yesh amiti, which we're not going to discuss right now because that's beyond everything. But then he triggered a whole process, starting with Oir, which we're going to get back to. And within the Oir, there's a process of how desire emerges. And in general, he's been speaking about two general levels. What he calls Ratzon Hanelam, Ratzon Hagali and Ratzon Hanelam, Koyach HaRatzon and Ratzon. I mean, going from the top down, Ratzon Hanelam, a concealed desire and a revealed one, a power of desire and desire. Now he's giving that higher level the word machshava. because actual Ratzon requires some form of movement, meaning you're pursuing it. But overall, we spoke about why it's called Ratzon, because overall it's still a desire, just not in the active state of pursuit. Like you said, that you're actually the hispilus, the excitement, the anticipation, that all comes with the second level of desire, which relates more to the thing that you're wanting. So basically, the distinction between the two, among other things, is the last piece we learned, is they actually have different type of localities in the spirit, so to speak, in the nefesh. Different locations. They're very different in their relationship with what is going to be desired. The first one is more aloof and removed, because you're saying it's worthy, roi lirtses, it's worthy of desire, and you've come to an absolute determination, but you're not doing anything about it. You're not pursuing it. So essentially that desire remains removed, what he calls b'hafdola be'erech, relatively removed from the actual fulfillment, from the actual product, which is the objective of the desire. Whereas the second desire that's actively pursuing it and being drawn, hatoya v'hamshacha and so on, is connected and much more related to the object, because that's what it's looking for. And to give an example, he gave an example between seichel and midas. But he said seichel and midas alpi seichel, or midas alpi tam v'das, be'ikar midas alpi tam v'das. What's the difference between seichel and midas? Briefly, seichel can appreciate something to the fullest. And you can even know it's good for you. Not just that conceptually seichel reviewed and researched and analyzed and evaluated and came to a determination, this is a good thing, it's worthy of being loved. Or it's a bad thing and it's worthy of being avoiding, like he said, davar hanev or davar hasanai, something that is worthy of being drawn to and attracted to, or something you should stay away from, be repelled. As he said, retreat backward, retreat, stay away, be careful. Seichel, that's what seichel is for. Seichel is an analyst, a mind that looks at a situation. Like if someone comes to you and says, I'm not sure which way I should go. I have two options. Should I go into this business or into this business? Should I become a partner with this person or with that person? Should I travel here? Should I travel there? So if you're not going to go by whim and by emotional subjectivity, which of course can mislead us because emotions can be manipulated, you use your seichel. Or you consult with someone that's objective. What do they do? What does the mind do? The mind is the excellent, I'm talking about a mind, especially an objective mind, that's not biased or prejudiced. What will it do? It will analyze. It's going to analyze. Is this the right thing to do? Not right thing? And then you come back and the verdict is, I did my research. This is the mind speaking to you. I did my research and this thing is an excellent option. But the mind, only without moving forward, the mind remains aloof and detached. It could even say it's good for me too. He said, the words were, Shadover Tev Loi, 4 lines from the bottom of page 54. Or the mind can tell you, no, this thing is destructive. This is not somewhere you want to go. Nevertheless, the mind does not get excited by it. It's not stimulated by it. Because the mind is a cold, calculated analyst on its own. As he says a few words later, it's like mayim, kadim. Mayim is cool, collected, aloof, removed. That's what a mind is. It's reflective. On the other hand, midas is the exact opposite. Midas are all excitable. Midas is you are not just anticipating getting it, you are involved in a process of doing everything possible to if this is a good thing, if the mind is agreed and has said, this is good, I want it. And you'll do whatever it takes. And the midas are alive, like fire, passionate, warm, and relates to the object. So the mind relates conceptually, intellectually, but it's not making any movement toward it. And the midas are completely engaged in that. So the mind does not make a move to be drawn to something or to retreat. That's why you see intellectual people, smart people, they may be near something that they don't like, but they're cool, doesn't bother me. I'm removed from it. Like some people, how could you sit, I was, I don't want to call myself in this category, but I was recently in an interview with somebody a lot of people don't like. They say, how could you sit with that guy in the same panel? So I said, it doesn't bother me. What do I care? I say what I have to say. because I don't personalize it. That is an example. So you could be near something that doesn't mean you have to follow it. The mind remains separate. Emotions, on the other hand, have a very strong opinion. I don't want to be near something that's destructive. I don't want to be near. I want to be near something that's positive, that's beautiful. So this is the example that he used. But let's go back now to midas al pi seichel and midas al pi tam v'das. He said that this difference in seichel and midas that I just described, we're talking midas al pi seichel. In other words, we're not just talking about emotional whims, or not just whims, raw emotions that a person has. We're talking about a midah that's born and is a result of an intelligent concept. It takes the seichel to the moment of midah. Basically, to put it in simple one sentence, I would say the following. Seichel tells you the thing is right or good or not good. And midas creates a relationship between you and the thing. Seichel is not a relationship. Midas is defined by relationships, because midas is emotions. And emotions means a relationship. Means I like this, I don't like it. I love you, I don't love you. Seichel doesn't speak in that language. Seichel says you are worthy of being loved, or this is not worthy of being loved. That's what Seichel does. Now, obviously, they talk to each other. Seichel informs midas, and midas can create the other way around. We're not talking now about hispadus sichli, that your mind gets excited about something. That's not relevant here, midas shebeseichel. But the seichel and the midas, so the seichel is telling the midas. So the midas are being driven by the seichel, but they're moving the seichel to the next level. I want a relationship with this now. So he said there are two levels in that. Midas al pi seichel, he said, is primarily the focus is the seichel tells you this is good. So the bechein, what's the result that is good? That now I'm going to pursue it. But not much more. So the Havana Vasog, what did he say? That by seichel, midas al pi seichel, he says it doesn't have chayis. The midas are, yes, there's a relationship and you're engaged, but the focus is getting it done, getting whatever it is that you love, or avoiding anything that is not worthy. So he says like this, I'm just using midas al pi seichel, rak bechein ein boi chayis. Because the bechein basically means, what's the verdict? It's not the full emotional process of involved and engaged in it. It's what's the end verdict, and that's what the midas pursue. Sometimes bechein is connected to nihi. In the midas, it's nesa chez yisoid, and midas al pi, what he's calling hapitam with his chayis, is more chesed gvura teferes. Some places it says nihi is like the action-based element of midas. Basically, midas as they're actualizing whatever it is that you are emotionally involved with. Whereas chesed gvura teferes, he doesn't say that here, but I'm just adding a bit, has chayis, because it's about not just, it's the whole passion and excitement about what you're achieving. So the seichel gave the verdict and said, the seichel determined that this is good or this is not good. Something to be loved or not to be loved. The midas say, I want a relationship with it. So midas, there's midas al pi seichel is more the focus is on the actual acquiring what it is that you want to have a relationship with. And the midas al pi tam v'das is more than that. He calls that midas al pi seichel is only a havana in that it's good or not good. And the midas al pi tam v'das also understand the whole implications of it. So it's like I'll just use an example. Let's say a person is dating, okay? And they're checking out somebody to see if this person is going to be worthy for marrying, to get engaged with and marry. So your seichel is involved, obviously, or hopefully, and determining, seeing the qualities of the person, the flaws, weighing, is there chemistry, is there connection, etc., etc. Your seichel, let's say, has done its job. This is a very good person, worthy of marrying. But you could also have a hesitation, whatever reason, it's not coming into an active midah, where you're really attracted and drawn to the person. Your seichel says a very good person. But then comes next step. Once the seichel says that, now comes the midah, and the midah says, this is a person I want to have a relationship with. This is a person I want to spend my life with. Now there's two parts to this. Midas al pi seichel will say, it's time for me to go and propose, get engaged, and marry this person. It's the bechein. It's not the whole full-blown emotional experience. It's the result of it all. And midas al pi tam v'das is far more than that. There, you are thinking about what kind of life you're going to have, what the teitzos will be, what the implications of this relationship are in a good way. Now, of course, all this can be applied also to the negative, where your seichel told you it's something to avoid. And there too, there's the two levels of emotions. But I'm sticking to the positive. But the same thing can be applied to hadover hamazik, lahavdil, to something destructive. So in midas, there's the midas as it's the final. So what's the bottom line? Time to propose, time to get married. The midas alpi tam v'das is the full-blown emotions involved. Why you like this person, the excitement around it. So Esav doesn't just mean the end results and the it means all the implications. Shalatev v'loitev. Okay, so that's how I would explain this whole section here. And bottom line is now to bring it back to Rotzen. So he says on top of page 55, after he explains the difference in mind and emotions, he says the following. He says the same thing is with the two Rotzen. The first level of Rotzen is like Seichel. Remember, it's an example. It desires and absolutely values and sees the importance of this thing to be desired, like Seichel, clear. It's clear like day. It's not a suffix. It's not ambiguous. It's not questionable. But there's no active pursuit. So it's still removed from the action. From the poil would be the activation of pursuing this desire, the object of the desire. I'm just reading from line 6 on top of page 55. And therefore, even though there was already inspiration, he was inspired and stimulated in this, whatever this object may be. And he made the determination. He determined. Nevertheless, he doesn't get excited by it. He doesn't get impacted by it. He doesn't. Mispol has many meanings here. Basically, is not getting heated up. He got cooked up by it in any way. To be an actual rotzen mamish, which means to pursue it, like a sinner, a channel. So what has been established? It's worthy of wanting. Like the seichel that said, this is a good thing. But adarabah, who betake of godel kazeh, shurak royal lirtzes, v'loy rotzen b'peil klal. Okay, now he's adding something more. He's saying the following. Not only is it removed, but on the contrary, its main focus, the intent, but take of godel, it's actually very resolved or very resolute, or very, very intense in this, that it's worthy of being litzes v'loy rotzen b'peil klal. No, it's in this state, he's actually deliberately, I don't want to say the word deliberate, it's not the word to use, but take of godel kazeh, that the rotzen is in such a state with such an intense, I'm trying to find, enormous intensity, that it should be worthy of wanting and not actually pursuing it. Meaning an active rotzen that's going to actively pursue and be drawn to it. I'm not sure. Let's see how we explain this. How do we explain this? Just give me a minute. Let me see something. Okay, I don't know if he's going to explain it, so let me try to explain what he just said. What I'm saying now is my own understanding of it. It doesn't say anything here that necessarily supports what I'm saying, but it doesn't not support. He just made a statement now. So I would say the following. Let's go back to the human example. Well, this is also the human example. When you first have the birth of a desire, there's a inspiration and you start desiring, let's say you want to have a home. And you come to, after the shakavitaria, back and forth, this is what I want. It's mukhlit. It's absolute desire. It will never change. He said before, bilti yeshuna. You're not going to go backwards. This is it. However, there's no active pursuit or being drawn to get it done. This doesn't mean you have no interest, whatever the reason is. So perhaps what he's trying to say is that in that stage, what's most important is not focusing on the how, but on the what. I want this thing. So what's focused on here is establishing an absolute desire for something. If in a way it would be diluted with pursuing it, it could be you didn't finish the process of really absolutely wanting it. So in a sense, he's saying in stage one, it's necessary to be focused exactly on that, and not pursuing it, but determining that this is the right thing to desire. That's how I would explain this. And then once that's in place, then comes another stage. Because till now we were thinking, you know what? It seems like a weak desire. You want it. You say it's worthy of wanting, but you're not doing anything to pursue it. So that means, do you really want it? The answer is absolutely. However, it's like in the state, let's talk about seichel. Before seichel moves to midas, the seichel has to be absolutely sure that this thing is good and this thing is not good. If the seichel would allow emotions to enter too early, then you wouldn't come to that resolution. So in other words, even though the goal is ultimately to bring it to midas and to bring it into action and pursue it and be excited about it, but while you're doing the research or while the mind is still calculating and evaluating, there the focus has to be not whether it's good for me. Because if you start asking whether it's good for me, it may distort your intellectual process, your objectivity. So the same thing with Ratzon. In the state where you're determining that it's a good, right thing to want, you don't want to have and say, how am I going to get it? You want to focus on the what. And that has to be b'teik of godel, like he says, adrabah, b'teik godel, it's not mixing in the rotzon b'peil, the active pursuit of it. That's how I would explain it. And actually, when I say it, I think it resonates. But again, it doesn't explain it. He just says the line, and I'm just explaining it. Okay.
Excuse me, is that an example of there's tokef at every level of Ratzon?
I don't know, what do you mean every level? We're talking now the level of Ratzon Hanelam, the Mukhlit, the Heskim, and he's saying that this is a state where you're not mispal, you're not actively pursuing it. And he says, Adarab, in this state, you are where you are. And that's what's necessary to be resolved and not mix into it the pursuit of it. So what are you asking me? I'm not clear.
I think there's a level of supposedly level. My understanding is there's a level of tokef for every level of Ratzon, but one would conclude, since it's
where are you getting that? What? He's not saying that here at all. He's not talking about tokef of Ratzon. He's saying this idea that the take of Gadol, this state of Ratzon is in that type of intensity that is focused on being, whether it's worthy of the resolve and the determination, not on the pursuit of it.
Right.
So why are you applying that to other levels of Ratzon?
I'm just curious. One would think that Makshava, since it's only Makshava, okay, fine, put it aside for a while.
I just explained. No, you may put aside the pursuit of it, but he's not. But this state is a very serious state. You've come to an absolute determination that this is Roy Litzis. It's not ambiguous. He's saying it. Yeah, that's what he's saying right now.
Fine. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I mean, when you're talking Lamaila, it's basically going to be the state where God makes the absolute determination that he wants existence. And then comes the levels that start implementing it, how to do it, and the pursuit of it. The importance of this level, you have to remember, is that it is an interface between the Etzem Ha'or and the levels of Or that are going to relate to existence. Because you want to have a level that reflects the Baal HaRotzen, the one who desires, that he comes to a point where he really desires something, but you want it to still be removed, because then it reflects more the godly state than the object. And then there's a level of Ratzon that starts relating more to the object. It's still the Ratzon of the Bala Ratzon, but the Bala Ratzon is now already gone to another stage. So each stage is necessary to be complete. As I said before with Seichel, if you pause in the middle of the intellectual cognitive process and say, let me figure out what it's going to do for me, you're compromising that pure objective mind at work. The same thing here. You want the Ratzon to be a pure desire from the one who wants, and without being in any way impacted by the thing he wants. That tells you, that gives you a relationship with God, even on God's terms. We're not talking about Atzmus now, we're talking about the Ratzon and the Ur. So that's the importance of this level, if you want to take it all the way. Remember, in the interface, you're always looking to make sure that all sides are represented, meaning the source, the producer, and the product. So in the example of the artist, the Ratzon to create art that's already in the process of creating art is focusing, yes, is the artist, but the artist as he relates to what he's going to create. The desire in the artist that it's a good thing to create art, and he hasn't yet determined, and he hasn't yet begun the journey toward pursuing it, is far more reflective of the nefesh of the artist. Because at this point, it's reflecting what he wants without getting into the actual active process of pursuing and being drawn to what he wants. So each has its place, and you have to look at it step by step. Each one relates in that way. So like, let's to use a simple example in Aveda. When you're serving God, you can focus on two different things. You can focus on what it's doing for you. Let's say you bench Birchas Hamazon. Thank you, God, for giving me Azonas Hakel, for sustaining everything, for giving me food, for giving me life, all the brachas. So you're focusing what God has done for you, and the appropriate thing is to show gratitude and give thanks and acknowledge. Like a korban teda, we're thanking. Then there's another thing. You say to God, what do you want? This is what I'm getting from you. What is it that you want on your terms? Not something that I'm benefiting from. So that's a level of Aveda that you're already focusing on God's interest, so to speak, or God's desire instead of. Now, of course, God desires also that you be fed and sustained and you're able to live in this world. But it's God's desire relating to you or to me or to existence. And then you say, I want to know what you want on your own. In Perek Yud and Tanya, he brings about the tzaddik who's not focused on his own needs. He says, Ezu chosid hamischasedim kene. Who's the chosid? The one who does kindness to kene, to his master, to God. Kene comes from the word nest, our source, like the bird's nest. But the shamish is kene. Ani nevresi l'shamish is kene. So the Rebbe explains there's another nusach. It says Ani lo nevresi el l'shamish is kene. What's the difference? One says I was created to serve my maker, my creator. But that doesn't mean you don't have other things you're doing. When you say Ani lo nevresi ella, it's liikuva. It means I don't have anything but my creator. So there's different levels of bittul, basically. One is a bittul like bittul hayesh, or yichud tata, or even das tachten that we're going to be learning about. On my terms, I come to relate to God as he relates to me. When you're talking about the ratzon, the hanelam, you're focusing a lot more on what does God want, as opposed to God's relationship that we have a relationship with God because God pursues us. So if you're talking about the benefit of creating something, obviously the first desire is not enough. You need to have a desire that pursues and is drawn to and relates to existence. But if you're talking about the full picture of having a relationship with God, the first ratzon actually gives us more of a taste of what God is like, or the godly desire is like, without it being diluted by the pursuit and relationship with us, even though that's what he wants as well. So bottom line is, it's just different dimensions and levels that are very different, and each one is important in its own way. You can't say that one is more important than the other. It all comes down to where you stand. There are times where we talk about Aveda al pitam v'das. That's Aveda that we relate to. That's Pnimius. Sometimes we talk about Kabbalah Seil, Aveda l'mayla mitam v'das. So someone will say, which one is greater? we don't measure them. It's apples and oranges. If you're talking about internalizing it, it's Aveda Pitam Badas because you relate to it. If you're talking about experiencing godly on a godly level, obviously something that's higher than Tam Badas connects you to something beyond your structure. So you'll say, which one is more important? The answer is both. We spoke earlier, Er and Yesh. We want an existence, but we want the existence to relate to God on God's terms. Now that sounds like a contradiction, but that's why we have the interfaces that are constantly balancing. Keep that in mind, and all this will come much more alive. This isn't just a discussion on levels of Ratzon, of how we get something done and so on. Because when you read it, just these pages, some would think, oh, I know a lot of people who want things and they never act on it. It almost sounds like a chsarn. But if you really think of it in context, it's not a chsarn. It's a chsarn from the point of view, yes, you need the desire to come and pursue. But this is not an analysis of people who are lazy or people who are not, or procrastinating, who don't actualize desires. This is an analysis actually of the way God made stages and how the process is supposed to work. And that's why I just elaborated. So seichel has to reflect. You don't want seichel to prematurely jump into the emotional state of saying, of the excitement and the whole anticipation and relationship with the object. You want it to be able to be objective. That's why ein eid nasa dayan. A witness can't be a judge because a witness has seen it and he's already subjective about it. A judge has to be detached. So you'll say detachment is a good thing? Depends when. If you're sitting in a court of law with a dayan and you need objective advice, asay l'charav, yes, you sure want someone that's objective. You don't want them to be subjective because they're not going to get accurate advice. But when you're talking about implementing, obviously when it comes to action, you need to have midas and so on. And I've learned Sich of Sheftim Nun Aleph. We'll soon be reading Parsha Sheftim. So he speaks there about the difference between Yayitzayich. It says, Vashiva Shavtayich Chereshenu, Yayitzayich Kivat Chila. What's the difference between a Shefet and a Yayitz? A judge and a consultant, an advisor. And he says it's like the difference between a Rav and a Chaver. A Yayitz gives you advice, but it does not with authority. He's more on your level. You could talk to him, consult with him. He hears you out. A Shefet has authority. This is how it is. A Selecha Rav, that's authoritative. Knelecha Chaver, that's a friend you're consulting with. Let's discuss it. And each one has a mila over the other. The Shefet has the mila, you're hearing a psak din. This is how it is. This is what Hashem wants. Dvar Hashem zu halacha, Moshe Rabbeinu. This is what God wants. So the power of that is that you get very clear what the truth is. What's missing there, it's not necessarily tailored and necessarily you relate to. You're just going to listen to it. The Kabbalah says you're basically suspending yourself, and I'll follow Allah. A yoyitz and a chaver is someone that relates more to you. What's your situation? How do we take this idea and apply it to your life? How do you personalize it? How do you make it relevant? How does it resonate? And they're both necessary. Each one has their own mind. This is common in Chassidus, where you have some difference in Moshe and Aaron, Shushbina de Malko, Shushbina de Matronisa. One is the Shushbina, which is like the escort or the representative of the king, and one is the representative of the queen. So Moshe was telling you what Hashem wants. Emes. Aaron was chesed. He went and dealt with shalom bayis issues, and that's why his yahrzeit is coming up as Rosh Chodesh Av. So maybe that's why I'm mentioning it. It says, what is it? Eivis Abrius. It says, Eivis, what is the lashon there? Avit HaMetamidim B'Hem. Eivis Abrius. Eiv Shalom V'Reidav Shalom. Eivis Abrius U'Mekarvan L'Teira. Havim Metamidav Shel Aaron. That was his thing. He was relating to the people. That's why when he passed away, by Yufku Kol Yisrael, everyone cried. Why? Because everyone felt the loss directly because he was involved in their personal lives. Moshe obviously was, and that's not a chassan. His role was to tell you what Hashem wants. So that's why the Medrash says, Emes v'chesed. Moshe was telling you Teres Emes. Moshe Emes v'Teres Emes. And chesed is essentially fitting it to the people. You know, when it says in Medrash that when God wanted to create the world, this is a common thing. God always consulted and usually never listened to who he's consulting. Maybe it's a lesson not to listen to consultants. I'm not sure. So he asked Emes, should we create the world? Should I create the world? And Emes said, no. Molei shkarim, ha'oretz molei shkarim. The world is filled with lies. Emes represented truth. Why would you create a world that is a lying world? Alma de shikra. Then God consulted with Chesed. What should I do? Should we create the world of Chesed? And Chesed said, absolutely, because there'll be a eretz molei chsadim. People will do a lot of Chesed and kindness. So the Medrash says God took Emes, he threw it to the ground, and said, Emes me'eretz titzmach. I'll embed you into existence, and ultimately you will sprout, you will emerge. But I can't follow because we're going to follow your pure truth, the world cannot be created because the world is not truthful. But I'm going to use Chesed is the tool that Hashem used. So he basically, it's like when you say to somebody, you want to be right, or you want to have a loving relationship. You want to win, or you want a relationship. So yes, sometimes, not God forbid, we compromise emes, but sometimes we can't just be that objective truth, it's right or wrong. Sometimes you have to overlook things. Sometimes you have to be more chesed than looking for the absolute emes. Again, not sheker, but that doesn't mean, in other words, it's not just, no, I can't compromise. You know why? Because it's not true. No, compromising is also part of relationships. Anyway, I digressed a bit. I just wanted to show that there's two levels in a relationship with something. One is the pure emes of it. What is it that God wants? And the second is the relationship where God is already relating and being drawn to, and the process that we're talking about, pursuing the thing that you want. And each one has its mila, a necessity. Now, he doesn't say all this, but if you read the whole context of the whole Maimorim, it's very clear that's what he's talking about here. Because remember, he's talking about two levels of ayin and now two levels of rotzen. He's trying to explain how there's different ways we connect. And remember, at the end of the day, God could have skipped rotzen hanelim. He could have gone from atzmus, etzema eir, rotzen hagoloi, rotzen mamish, and then continue on. The fact that there is this level tells you that it has a necessity, it's important in the interface process. I hope that was helpful. Okay.
It's great, thank you.
So now let's continue. So going back, so Adrab B'Teikav Gov, this is the Ratzon Hanelam that, similar to the Seichel, remains detached from the thing it's desiring. U'lachein Ratzon Zeh Nikra Machshava. He's going back to what he said in the previous page. And that's why this level of Ratzon is called thought. Al derech machshava kara she'ena b'yispailis. Like a cool, collected, a cold, detached thought. Remember we said on top of the page that seichel is like mayim. So now he's using it also on machshava. Now you may wonder, so one second, is it seichel or machshava? We know there's two different things. So he's going to explain now that machshava is a lavush. Let me just say this is something that for whatever reason, no one told us when we were in yeshiva, and I had to figure this out myself. I remember, I always wondered, what's the difference between seichel and machshava? We say there's 10 keiches on nefesh. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, cited earlier, seichel midas, right? 3 seichel chabad, and then 7 midas. Chesed, gvura, teferes, netzach, yesod, malchus. And the first 3 in mind is chochma, bina, das. Then suddenly the Alter Rebbe says, and there's 3 levushim. Now he doesn't call it keiches, he calls it garments. Machshava, thought, dibur, maisa. So the first obvious question anyone learns is, says, what's the difference between machshava and seichel? Machshava is thought and seichel is intelligence. Now, you may know this already, but I'm just saying it's always good to state. The difference is one is a koyach and one is an expression. The levushim are like garments. Like a garment, it's not part of who you are, but it's necessary to express who you are. A garment in a closet doesn't express anything. Seichel is the actual faculty that the nefesh has, the ability, the mind, the ability to conceive, understand, formulate, and conclude an idea. Chochma bina das. Machshava doesn't have any power. It's like a garment, it's like putting on a jacket. The jacket has no living force, but it gives, It gives body and shape and manifestation to the faculty. So hypothetically, if we had 10 koiches and we didn't have machshava, dibur, and maisa, you'd have 10 faculties locked inside your soul with no way to express it, not to yourself, not to another, and not an action. So machshava is essentially the conscious process of activating your seichel, and that you're conscious of it in a specific thought. So right now, if someone said to you 2 + 2 = 4, that's a machshava. How many other sichlim do you have in your mind? Millions, billions. Right now we're learning Tzadik Dal. We're learning this idea. How many ideas exist in your brain right now, in your seichel? Far more sichlim than there are. Machshava is the active process. What are you thinking about right now? When I say to you, what are you thinking? I'm saying, what part of your seichel is manifesting in machshava? Or better said, what thought is right now accessing the reservoir of your billions of ideas? And you'll say, I'm thinking about Atzmos. I'm thinking about the 9 days. And you say, do you have any other ideas in your mind? You said, absolutely. We can't even count them. So machshava is the actual expression, conscious expression to yourself. That's the first levush. So there's only 3 ways to express yourself. One to yourself, one to another. Dibur is expressing that thought or idea to another. And Maisa is actualizing in some way, writing it or building something based on it. So difference in machshava and a koyach and a levush. A koyach is part of your hard drive, and machshava is like your software, the hardware and the software. The hardware is your seichel and midas. That's who you are. That's what consists of your personality. Machshava and dibra maisa is the software that's accessing it, that can change all the time. Like you can have right now, you could have beautiful thought. You could have a beautiful thought coming from a beautiful idea. Rahman al-Islam, something distracts you. You could have a machshava zara. So it's also called machshava. Right now, your thought, you can't think about 2 things at once. So now suddenly the garment has become soiled because what you're thinking about is something that is not so holy. So what's changed is the garment has become soiled. The seichel remains seichel. The thing you thought about 5 minutes ago or 2 minutes ago that was a kedusha is still there. The seichel is there, but it's not in the form of a machshava. So when the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that a Beinani, his keiches do not change. His keiches are like a Rasha. The only thing is he's in control of his machshava dibra maisa. He's control of activating. What his expression is always pure. Machshava dibra maisa is always pure. But his keiches, yeah, he has the keiches of a nefesh habamis. He can do things, think, speak, and do things that are not in kedusha. So that's the Beinani. So I just wanted to make the distinction between machshava and seichel. I'm going to explain this a bit here now. As far as this rotzen goes, so the rotzen he compared to seichel, but now he's saying, why do we call it machshava? Not why. He says this is called machshava, means it's the thought of this thing that you're desiring. And like a machshava, derech machshava kara, machshava thought, like seichel, is detached. Kara, she'ena b'ispilus. It's a cool, collected, removed thought. Tehine, machshava hi levush ala nefesh. Machshava is a garment to the nefesh. Why do we call it a garment? Because as I said, machshava dibra maisa on their own, no koiches. The machshava dibra maisa have no substance, like garments. There's no body. What is the point of a garment? On the other hand, when you have koiches, the machshava dibra maisa, the levushim serve as the expression of those faculties. I just want to say one more thing. I use this very often. It's a good way to explain it. You know, sometimes you see people. Remember in school, there were children, classmates. We had classmates. I remember a classmate that was very quiet. He was very shy. Would never speak, and he was dismissed as being stupid. I personally knew him, and I knew he was not. As a matter of fact, was probably the smartest guy in the class. But because he didn't have dibur, or he was shy, he didn't know how to express. That was a perfect example. His koyach haseichel was tremendous, relatively, but his levushim were compromised. The same thing in machshava. There are a lot of people who have very smart brains. They have good brains, but they don't know how to. They're not trained in organized thinking. You ever hear someone speak and you see he's brilliant, but he doesn't know how to organize his ideas. So you hear idea like ABC is not in the right order. Point number 2 is set as point number 1, and point number 10 is point number 3. It's like this is brilliant, but it's disorganized. That's a perfect example that the koyach haseichel is strong, But the levush was not trained how to organize, how to think. In other words, in the right order and process. It's more of a technique, because you have people who are very organized, but they may not have so much intelligence. So my point is that you could make a ratio. Basically, if you want to know where a person stands, is the ratio of the koyach over the levush. The more the levush is developed, the more it can actualize our faculties. When our levushim are weak, the faculties can be very strong, but they don't have how to express and manifest themselves in strength. So many times you'll find people have tremendous potential, but they never really turned it into a thought, speech, or action. So it remains like locked inside them. Okay, so now he says, "Dehine machshava hu levush ala nefesh."
How do you develop your levushim?
I'm sorry?
How do you develop the levushim? Machshava dibur nois.
This is called chinuch, training. Just like you see people, for example, very musical, talented people, and they sit down at a piano or an instrument, and you see right away that they have a certain brilliance, but they don't have technique. They don't have method. So a good teacher will teach the method. Here's how you can organize the way your talents. So it really comes down to training. This is pure training. You train levushim. You can't train koiches, because the koiches is how you're wired. A person who's a musical genius is born that way. But you could train levushim. Now, I will say this. There's some people, through training, achieve more than others who have more talent. Because a raw talent that's not harnessed doesn't always have an organized way and a healthy way of expression. So expression is trained. It's like training somebody how to speak effectively, how to write. There are rules. And there are rules to this. Like, how do you write a thesis? How do you write an idea? How do you go from a klal to a prat? How do you outline it? How do you break it down in a way that a reader can read? These things you learn either with someone that trains you or coaches you, or you learn in experience, with experience. So levushim is essentially a chinuch thing. Machshava dibur nois is completely training. When we hear about the Chassidish mashpim that taught their students to think 30 seconds before davening on Chassidus, think about one idea without distraction. That's called conditioning. That's conditioning your machshava. And that we have full capacity over. Koiches, you don't have bechira over your faculties. You can actualize more and more faculties. As a matter of fact, good levushim will draw out your faculties in a better way. But you can train. It's really training. That's what it comes down to. Even as we learn, as we learn here, a big focus of my teaching is always, not only here in all the classes I do, is not just to teach the information, but to present methodology. Methodology is how you learn, not just what to learn. How you read something, how you make sure you don't make a mistake, how do you go back? That's why you see how adamant I am. What does it say? What are we interpreting? Because you want to be truth and the integrity, you want to preserve the integrity of the source. You don't want it to be distorted. So it's very vital. This is a training in machshava and in dibur for that matter, and ma'isa as well. But it's a way of doing things.
Thank you.
Even even a mechanic, an engineer, anyone, even someone working with their hands, they work with an expert. What do they learn? They learn how to do koyach hamaisa. Koyach hamaisa, which means how to form something, how to fix something. You see, someone who's really masterful with their hands. I'm talking about even the levush of maisa. That's a training thing. Now, some people, because they have the natural talent, it's easier to train, and also they will take to it. I know some things that someone would try to train me, I just won't be good at it. That's just not I'm not wired that way. Others are wired in different ways. So it's all about the combination of what capacity, the koiches you have, and how you're trained to use them in the right way. Look, everyone always asks the question whether the Rebbe, was he born a Talmid Chacham? Was a scholar? The answer would be not necessarily. He was born with the koiches of being everything, and then he had to work on it. He had to learn. It wasn't just downloaded into his system. And even the greatest people, Moshe Rabbeinu and all the great, they have to go through the process of learning, and they harave, and they look into things, because it's about actualizing what they have. You can have all the potential in the world, but it has to be actualized. Now, do they need the same amount of work as we do? Maybe more in a way, because what they have to actualize is so much greater. On the other hand, maybe less because they already have so much head start. But in other words, it's all about a combination of how you're wired, and then actualizing that. And we all know, has anybody actualized all their potential? Of course not. That's why it's called potential. We've actualized some of it. So machshava dibur ma'isa is an actualizer in a sense, in a certain way as well. Anyway, so he says like this now, going back to machshava. The hine machshava hu levush al nefesh. It's a garment to the soul. Va'nefesh mischalekes l'shtayim. Okay, he's going back to Tanya now. And the nefesh divides into two. Ukamayim Rabbeinu Nishmasei Eden, like the Alter Rebbe. This is referring to the Alter Rebbe. He says in Peirik Gimel, right? Yeah. V'kach b'nefesh adam shenechlekes l'shtayim seichel u'midas. And the same as b'nefesh adam, like it is in the Sfiras, that it separates into two: seichel, intelligence, and emotions. Asher al kein kasher levush hamachshava misharis asamidus. And therefore, when the garment of thought serves, misharis is like from the word like a helps, as helper. It's serving the midas. Remember, midas again are faculties. You have chesed inside your heart. That doesn't mean you're acting on it. It could be dormant. When you think about doing chesed, you get inspired. I want to be kind. You speak about it. You act on it. So basically, the levushim are then being a mesharis. They're serving and essentially delivering the midah. So he says, so when the levush machshava serves the emotions, ukanal the kol poel bo aydei machshava v'hehirur shamidas me'edim. Like we learned earlier, the kol poel, every action, every resulting action, every result, you can say, comes through thought, v'hirur. We talked about machshava and hirur. This goes back a long way as well. I don't remember where that was. So machshava and hirur. So machshava and hirur are generally two names for the same thing, a thought. But in Tanya, he says hirur is an inadvertent thought, which means not one that you control. It just comes, it just arises. And machshava is a deliberate thought. That's why he says that Allah, when you have hirhuri aveda, so once you sense that an inadvertent thought, gimel dvarim she'adam einu nitzal behem chol yom, the Alter Rebbe brings, that a person can't control an inadvertent thought. But as soon as you're aware, as soon as it becomes machshava, you don't let it become a machshava, a deliberate thought. But sometimes I think here in Ayin Tzadik Dalet, if I recall, hirur I think was early, there's higher than machshava. Hirur was like the original thinking, and then machshava is a more developed. Well, maybe that is the same thing. I'm not sure. You remember where it was hirur machshava? What page? It's a long time back, very far back. I'm just looking quickly. If I see it right away, good. If not, we'll just move on. No. Okay, I don't see it quickly. I'll look around. I'll share with it once I find it. Okay, so Al-Kaponim, he said earlier, we learned that every poil comes through thought, two levels of thought in Hirur. Shamidas me'edidim ha'machshava laharer. The midas, obviously, as I said before, levushim don't have any vitality of their own. They're like a garment. But as the midas, person has a midah, let's say the midah of chesed, that stimulates the thought. Laharer eich lahavi dover hanirtza lahem makeich el hapoel. So the faculty called the midah stimulates the machshava to think how am I going to bring this desired, this is the thing, the desired objective, from potential to actual? That's how he's saying it. Okay. And since the midas are passionate or warm, as we said before, they're not cool and aloof and detached. Midas are fiery. They're like a fire. They're warm and emotional. Therefore, the machshava that it stimulates is also machshava chama. So since machshava, all it is a garment, it depends what it's dressing up. If it's dressing a midah and the midah is warm and passionate, so the thought that is thinking how to actualize that emotion is also a warm one. But when machshava is now serving intelligence, no, it's not how to fulfill how to actualize an emotion called love, let's say. So the love of the emotion carries over that the garment is also carrying a loving and warm attitude. When machshava, however, is serving seichel, v'seichel kar, and seichel is cold, it means cold and non-emotional. Gama machshava hikara. Also, the thought is a cool type of thought. See, so he's what?
Koro.
Kara, not kara.
Koro.
Kara. Okay. So he's explaining basically this whole section that we just learned is explaining the line that he said that this ratzon is called machshava, al derech machshava kara, she'ena b'yispailis. So this whole section here is explaining, since machshava is just neutral, it's a garment. So if you put on, let's say, a shirt on a very hot body, the shirt is also going to get hot. If you put the shirt on a cold body, it's going to get colder. So that's just a physical example. What it means here is that the levush is commensurate to the thing that it's dressing up. In this case, what it's manifesting and expressing. So the way I would explain it is that if you're thinking, your machshava is thinking about how to be kind to someone you love, a stranger. So the machshava by definition is going to be a kind machshava. What does that mean? The personality of that thought is going to be a warm one. You're going to think warmly about that person. You're going to look for the benefits. You're not going to be detached. The machshava is going to be one that is very, just like speech. If you speak to someone you love, you're going to speak kindly. You're going to speak with warmth, with passion, with expressing the feeling that's driving that machshava. So machshava is the actualization and the expression, but it's an expression that's commensurate to the thing it's expressing. On the other hand, when a person thinks or speaks intelligence, it doesn't mean you speak in a dismissive way, but you don't have that same warmth. It's much more a detached type of discussion because the mind is now thinking and the mind is expressing itself. And the expression of the mind is not one. That's why you'll see, yes, you could have a teacher that is very passionate and excited, but it's not necessarily a passion and excitement that relates to the people he's speaking to. It's a passion and excitement about the idea. But his actual thing is not personal in the sense because he's not trying to express a feeling. Now, I understand you can say, what about a teacher who's doing both? He's teaching with love. We could have somebody who's speaking an idea that comes from the mind, but it's done in a loving way. Obviously, if you mix the two, it's going to be different. He's talking here, if you just separated the two, one is pure, cool, collected ideas. So that machshava too is a cool, collected sort. If it's an expression of something that is warm and passionate, then the garment machshava will also be. So he's explaining the word machshava kara. Okay. Gama machshava kara, the ena begeder ispailis klal. That's the key. Cold here doesn't mean like lahavdil cold by Amalek, apathetic or trying to cool you off. It just means it's removed, it's detached. It's objective, basically. It's not subjective. And it's without ispailis, it's not excitable, it's not caught up in the emotions of the experience. And one more line and we'll stop here. V'chein hu b'rotzen hazeh. The same thing is with Ratzon, this higher level of Ratzon. But Ratzon hazeh hu rak heskem vehechled b'machshava. It's just a determination and a resolve in the thought, in machshava. That's why we call it machshava. So it's basically machshavas harotzen. You could say here machshava, the machshava of the rotzen. Yeah, that's what you'd have to say. We'll stop here. He's going to continue the next section. More differences between these two levels of rotzen. And yeah, let's see here. Okay, let's stop here. We're middle of page 55, Sadik Dalet.